Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. It is good to see you again, and welcome back to Path to Abundant Living. I'm your host and moderator, Ryan Ruff. It's great to be back with everyone, as always, on the show. And of course, I'll be joined by my right-hand men, and that's the star of our show, Mr. Matt Nordman and Scott Morrison of Morrison Nordman Wealth Management. We're going to be diving into a great conversation. Super excited for today's episode. We've had this one circled on the calendar for quite some time. We're going to be joined by a very special guest in Lieutenant Col Dan Rooney, the founder of Folds of Honor, which is a nonprofit organization that's been making shockwaves over the last few years, really since 2007. And to give you guys, our audience, kind of a brief synopsis on what Folds of Honor does and why we felt so compelled to bring Lieutenant Colonel Rooney on the show is, well, Lieutenant Colonel Rooney has, like I said, founded Folds of Honor, which is an organization that has really provided life-changing scholarships to the spouses as well as the children of America's fallen and disabled military. And now they've also opened up their mission and expanded it towards helping families of America's first responders as well. So far throughout, since its inception in 2007, they have given out, over 44,000 scholarships, life-changing scholarships, I would say. 90% of all donations going towards those scholarships. So we've got a lot to dig into with not only the incredible life story of Lieutenant Colonel Rooney, but also the great work that he's done with Folds of Honor. But before we bring him on, let's say hi to the guys. Matt, Scott, it's good to see you both this morning. How you doing?
Ryan, great to see you. Good to see you
again,
Ryan.
Scott. Looking good, Matt.
Good to be with you guys as always. Hey, we've had this episode circled on the calendar for quite some time. Before we bring Lieutenant Colonel Rooney on, Matt or Scott, why don't you frame things up? How come, what was it about Lieutenant Colonel Rooney that made you want to, make sure he came on the podcast to talk about a path beyond, and to abundant living?
Sure. So I had I've had the opportunity twice now to play the golf course American Dunes, which Colonel Rooney, will most likely touch on. It's a golf course, but it benefits Folds of Honor, which you mentioned is an unbelievable organization and what they are about and what they do to support those families. And so when you look at that, and then with the people that we are fortunate enough to work with and how charitably inclined they are, we thought, well, let's bring Colonel Rooney on. And then you dig more into him and his story as a fighter pilot and a PGA professional, which again, Scott and I were talking about this recently. We all know the odds of playing in the NFL are pretty slim. But when you look at, well, what are the odds to become a fighter pilot are even greater. The opportunity to play in the NFL, you're more likely to play in the NFL than you are to be a fighter pilot. And when you hear that story and then when you look at those that defend, when we were talking about before the show the documentary about Folds of Honor, and in the beginning, to me, if you ever watch it, is so powerful that 0.5% of the U.S. population serves in the military, defending 99.5% of us, and so grateful and so thankful for those that do. And so again, with what Folds of Honor does, and just the story of when you read Colonel Rooney's book, Flying to the Wind, and you think, okay, he's achieved this unbelievable level of success, and then the stuff that he had to overcome, which maybe he'll share, and if not, I strongly encourage everyone to read the book, is really, really inspirational and impressive. And so we thought, you know what? This is an unbelievable story to hear, and the work that's being done. And like we said, we work with a very passionate group of people, and thought, you know what, this is someone that we would love to speak with and get as much information out there to people as we can.
Amazing. Well, I appreciate you teeing us up, Matt. With that, let's go ahead and welcome Lieutenant Colonel Dan Rooney to the show. Welcome to Path to Abundant Living. Appreciate you and your time today.
Yeah, hey, blessed to be with you guys. Speak a little life. Can't wait. Thanks for having me.
Excited to have you here. Very excited.
Absolutely.
So can you tell us again, for those that don't know, how does one say, you know what, I'm going to become not only a fighter pilot, but a PGA professional?
I just think, it's Wordsworth is a famous poet, and I love this line. He said, God brings you into this world trailing clouds of glory. And I translate that as everybody's here for a reason. Your life's work is to figure out why you're here and then get really good at doing that. So I don't think anything is really our own. It's not our own path. It's not our own ideas. God puts these things on your heart. And I was, 12 years old and met my first fighter pilot. And I was already an avid golfer. And a couple of days later, it's like the hand on the shoulder. I'm like, Dad, I know what I'm going to do with my life. I want to be a golf pro and a fighter pilot. And his response to this, this thing I proclaimed as a 12-year-old kid was interesting. And he asked me a question. He said, son, can you tell me which way an airplane takes off? And I'm like, I think it's into the wind. He said, yeah, that's exactly right. Obviously preparing me for these inevitable headwinds that would stand between me and a very unlikely dream as a golf pro and a fighter pilot. I'm a rare bird. I'm a one-on-one. Only got to put those two things together in the world. But the cool part of what we get to talk about is God's bigger plan and why he put that dream on my heart to help so many other people go chase the dreams in their life.
Well, and that leads in perfectly to just how did Folds of Honor come to be for you?
Yeah, so I call them moments of synchronicity or chance with a purpose. That there's a couple things that I am certain of in life, and this is one. There is no blind luck. There's no serendipity. There's no coincidence. There is a force. I call it synchronicity, how God connects every living being, the earth that we're on. And in this world where everybody is, heads down in their device all the time, it's even more challenging to recognize chance and purpose in your life, but also understand that even when you recognize these moments, they're meaningless unless you have the courage and faith to take action. So to unpack that, I get back from my second combat tour of duty in Iraq. A moment of synchronicity that would change my walk forever is not in a fighter jet, but in a commercial airliner going from Chicago O'Hare to Grand Rapids, Michigan, land at like midnight, pulling into the gate. The captain, interrupts everybody getting off the plane and says, hey, ladies and gentlemen, we have an American hero on board. We're carrying the remains of Corporal Brock Buckland, who was killed in Iraq, and his identical twin brother, Corporal Brad Buckland, is in first class and has brought him the 7,000 miles home. And I've done 3 combat tours, and I have witnessed the cost of freedom. I've seen many people give life and limb for our country, but I've never seen this side of war. And that night, I watched the Buckland family on the darkest night of their lives. His brothers, his wife, his parents, his 4-year-old son, as Brock's American flag draped coffin inched down from the cargo ramp. And, the ceremony finishes up, and I stand up, and despite the captain's request, more than half the people had gotten off the plane that night. Nowhere to go except that blanket of freedom we'll all sleep under, courtesy of Brock Buckland and the 1.1 million veterans who have paid the ultimate sacrifice. And I felt a calling from God. It's that simple. And I called my wife, and I'm like, hey, we got to do something. And that something would become Folds of Honor. And we started above our garage with nothing. No money, no knowledge of how to run a nonprofit. And, fast forward, it was 16 years ago, 2 days ago, we turned 16. We've, awarded 54,000 scholarships worth north of $250 million to spouses and kids who've had somebody killed or disabled in combat. And we've just recently added first responders, our first class of first responders. And this group that just is starting school as we do this podcast, about 9,200 people, representing $42 million in life-changing education. And that is my vocation. It is 7 days a week. I would not trade my job with anybody in the world. I get to wake up, serve God, serve others every day. And really, we could probably quit the podcast right there if we wanted to. Because that's the exclamation point. That's the mic drop on my life. That is why I am here.
Which is again, unbelievable, the impact that you and the organization are having on so many people. Again, super thankful is not even close to a word to describe how we feel for your service as well of all the other service members. So how do you go from talking with your wife and you're above the garage going, we don't even know anything about this, to, okay, we're partnering in the west side of Michigan with Jack Nicklaus to start American Dunes, which is, again, an unbelievable golf course that I tell everybody, you don't have to play golf. Do not, if you don't play golf, don't even think about it, which Scott would attest. He does not play golf, even though his dad was a college golf coach for 35 years. That's another story for another day. But
if Dan saw me golf, he'd know why my dad gave up on me.
But I again, I've had the opportunity to play twice now, and I tell everybody, just go to see the Wall of Honor and the work that's being done there. So how do you get from above your garage to that next step of, we're going to buy the old Grand Haven Golf Club and transform it into what it is today?
Yeah, so I'm going to take you way back. This is called a redirect in the media business, but
Okay.
there's a story before the story. And so you go through your training to become a fighter pilot, and it's 2.5 years long. It's $8 million per copy. The average starting class of an undergraduate pilot training, UPT, is 45 people, and 4.8% of the people statistically make it through the whole program. Doesn't mean you don't fly for the Air Force, but you don't fly fighters. You fly cargos, air refuelers, bombers, lots of cool stuff, helicopters. But obviously, I would make it through the program. And like the defining lesson that I learned in that 2.5-year program that I share with anybody who will listen is, once you make it to the F-16, which is about 18 months into the program, at Luke Air Force Base, and you get 4 rides with an instructor, and your 5th ride is solo. So F-16, single seat fighter, where air to air, air to ground, has more horsepower than the entire starting grid of an F1 race, 2.5 times the speed of sound, $60 million fighter jet, and you've had 4 rides. Your 5th ride, you're by yourself.
Good luck.
So I climb in the cockpit. You get in there like 10 minutes before you're supposed to start, and just praying that I'm gonna have the strength and fortitude to go do this today. Obviously, you're super nervous, and I realize that I'm not by myself. And it's like every person in the 26 years of my life that told me, dude, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, this will never work. We all have these people in our lives. Some well-intentioned, because they just don't want you to go do something extraordinary because it makes themselves feel bad, is with me. And I reach over, and it just so happens I've got a helmet right behind me here. Didn't plan this, but so this is my combat fighter pilot helmet right here, and it's sitting on the rail next to me. And I reach over and I put the helmet on, and I put this dark visor down on the helmet, and I close it all out. And ever since that moment in my life, I've had this saying, dark visor down. And I think we all need a dark visor in our lives to avoid becoming a prisoner of common assumption. And, it was probably the most defining moment for me when I realized, man, no one's coming. And I don't downplay the aspect of a team, of your family, of your coworkers, your spouse. But at the end of the day, we're brought into this world by ourselves, and we leave by ourselves. And the accountability and the opportunity that comes through your life is up to you. And so I would go and fly that mission successfully, and I land about an hour later. And as I shut down the motor from that mission, it hits me. Go before you're ready. And God's like, man, if you go, I will always be with you. And that was a real burn the boats moment for me. The story of Cortez, it was like 1517, where they hit the shores, the enemy shores, and he turns to his men and he's like, hey, burn the boats. And they're like, what do you mean? It was like, dude, we're going to win or we're going to die. That's it. And I lit a match on all those people on the boat of my life that were dragging me down, that had been in my past, and I moved forward. And I've had this saying, go before you're ready. So we're going to bring this full circle to the question you asked me. So how in the world do I take our family's golf course, which we'd had for about 25 years. My dad had owned it. It was on a slow descent into bankruptcy. So there's fires burning all over the place. But so often, I'll tell you, in my life, when I face great challenge, I know it's just God moving me. And you look back at all of our lives, how many times like, oh, you're so quick to judge what's good or bad in our lives. But most often in the rear view mirror of life, and the most extreme example is like the Holocaust survivors. Like 98% of them look back and say their time in a concentration camp was a positive force in their life overall. That we say, well, this is bad. But if you look back at your life at all the bad stuff and how much good comes out of that, it really makes you not quick to judge everything. So house is burning down, Grand Haven Golf Club. My Hail Mary pass is, let me talk to Jack Nicklaus. And I tell my dad, and the only reason we were doing this as opposed to selling it as real estate is because it's where Folds of Honor started. We had our first little golf tournament there, 67 golfers show up. And, you know, the Folds history I've already shared with you. So this place is near and dear to our heart. And so I met with Mr. Nicklaus. And I found the best thing to do too, when you're in trouble, if you just tell the truth, people will help you. We hide our failures and we hide trouble like, oh man, this is a bad thing. But if you just tell people, and I told Jack, man, I am, you know, up the proverbial creek without a paddle. This is really bad. And he looks at me, he said, man, I'm in. He said, let's go build this. I called it a golf church because it's God, country, and golf in that order. And waived his $3 million fee, and off we marched. And we're in our third season at American Dunes. It's in Grand Haven, Michigan. And you've got to experience public golf course. And it is built to raise money and awareness for Folds. Second year of operation, we donated about $1.1 million to Folds of Honor. Obviously, we're in our third year of operation, but super cool. Labor Day, so September 4, 5, 6, the kickoff to college golf on the Golf Channel with the Folds Collegiate. And it really summarizes what this place is about, because we got all the academies, Navy, Air Force, West Point, and then we have some of the greatest golf schools in the country. Jack coming up to host the event, and it's just an amazing place.
I wholeheartedly agree, and again, recommend anybody, if you get the chance, just go, just to see it and experience the Wall of Honor, because it is very, very moving. So
Yeah.
Dan, I wanted to, you know, because I know there's so much time between when you were in the military to when you left the military for a short period of time. You know, in reading the first couple of chapters of the book, one of the things that really jumped out at me was, you know, this isn't really a book about you know, a military officer telling his story about being an Air Force pilot. It's about life. It's about overcoming. It's about perseverance. It's about anybody being able to take some of the things that you're saying in your book and use them in their life. And so I think about the headwinds that your father was alluding to when you were 12 years old, and the headwinds that were there right up until the time that you talked to Jack Nicklaus. Give me some sense of, or give our audience some sense of, what was going on in your life personally that inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about it before we jumped on the podcast here, but I truly believe our lives are defined by what we do when it doesn't go our way. And this book, Flying to the Wind, is about how we have the ability to persevere during life storms, because we all have them. It's the common denominator of humanity. Like, nobody really cares about my life storm. I almost killed myself in an F-16. I'm going bankrupt building a golf course in Tulsa. You know, pretty much everybody in in my life abandons me besides my wife and my parents. But looking back, it was clear, man, I had to go to the desert by myself. And I would walk out of the desert a completely changed person. And that humility through failure, and I say it in the most humble way, I really hadn't failed up until this point. And you start to believe, hey, it's me. Look what I can do. I set this goal, I went and did it. I set this goal, I went and did it. I, beat Tiger Woods. I'm a fighter pilot. I've got a nonprofit. I'm building a golf course. Look at all this. And then God's like, oh, no. Wait just 1 minute. You have nothing to do with anything in your life, except maybe getting up and having a good attitude. But the dose of humility I got walking through the desert was extraordinary. And I got a really awesome, story of synchronicity. And I'd hit my lowest point. Forget what was going on. I hit my lowest point. I'm on a run in East St. Louis on the Mississippi River on a February morning, dark, cloudy, cold. It's like sleet, rain mix. And I'm out there all by myself, and I just stop. And it's such a metaphorical, because I was the loneliest, lowest place I'd ever been in my life on this morning. And I gotten to a point where I didn't care if my takeoffs and landings matched anymore. Call that, passively suicidal. I don't know, but I was just done, man. I had nothing left, and I stopped. And I'm like, God, you got to give me a sign here. And out of this low overcast came an eagle, and this eagle circled around me 3 times.
Wow.
And it was the most overt sign I've ever gotten in my life. And I just feel God like wash over me. It's like, man, I got you. But so often in our lives, I mean, we got to hit the bottom in order to see the top. And it sucks in the moment. And that night I was talking to a Folds recipient. Her name's Ginger Gilbert, and her husband, Troy, had been an F-16 pilot, was killed in Iraq. And he left behind 5 kids. His oldest was 8, down to 6-month-old twin daughters. And I told Ginger this story, and she was like, Dan, that story is unbelievable. She's like, but you're not going to believe this. Today would have been Troy's 40th birthday. And his favorite scripture is Isaiah 40:31, which is, even young men will grow weary. Even young men will grow weary and stumble, but those who hope in the Lord, I will raise them up on wings like eagles. And I literally started to write Fly Into the Wind that night. And as I look back on it, like, obviously this struggle was certainly for me as a vessel to work on God's behalf and get that relationship straight. But it was like, gave such meaning to my struggle when I could put it down on paper and give people a way to live true to themselves and eliminate all the stuff in their life that is holding them back. And I call that code of living CAVU, which is a fighter pilot acronym, stands for Ceiling and Visibility Unlimited. But every day is an unlimited gift. And it's just been such a blessing to watch the places that book has gone. I think it's in its 4th print. I'm a nobody, but especially it's had an impact on young men. It's just been awesome to watch God work through me. And I know those words aren't mine. They were his, that I was blessed to get to put down on a piece of paper.
Love that you're willing to share not only your story, but that your faith, because your faith, like us, your faith is most important to you and family. And so when one of the things that of overcoming in the book that you talk about, and I want to make sure everybody reads the book, but one of the tips that you give people is chair flying. Can you expand on it a little bit to help people, right? Because we, like you had said, none of us make it through life unscathed. We are all going to. And like you had said also, when we look back, that's when we grow. If we allow God to work, that's when we're going to grow the most. Now, sometimes it's hard. It's hard, right, to let him do that in us. But can you share kind of the I don't want to say the one method, but one of the things that you recommend is chair flying?
Yeah, so I love it. So to that last point, so the samurai call it the way. So every day you wake up, you got a choice. You can live the easy way or you can live the right way. And chair flying is critical to living the right way. And the short version of this story is I fly one of the most fastest lethal weapon systems in the world. The most valuable training tool we have is a chair that we sit in, and we mentally rehearse our mission, what can go wrong, what could go right. And we do it in an incredibly positive way. So we're manifesting, and we incorporate, it sounds kind of crazy, but we incorporate talking to yourself in the third person too. And there's great science behind that for people recovering from addiction, extreme stuff. Like when you talk to yourself in a third person, it's really powerful the way it connects. Nobody can tell you exactly why, but the whole point of chair flying is, it's the vision cast. And so few people have the ability to sit by themselves in silence anymore. I would like, that's my one challenge. We're on a big tune, and I was like, sit by yourself for a half hour in silence, not sleeping, and see what starts to happen in your life. It's like the hardest thing to do in this world that we live in, that has to be distracted, has to be going all the time. We feel like we're not productive. But the inability of man or woman to sit by themselves quietly for 30 minutes, not asleep, is non-existence. And that is the portal to which God talks to you.
Be still.
Yeah.
Be still, right?
Yeah.
Still.
Sit in that chair.
Yeah.
Be still in your mind. And it's the greatest thing accessible to any of us, but nobody does it. I do it every morning.
We live in that microwave society, right? Where we can't wonder, we have to know, we have to be visually, auditorially stimulated at all times, right? That's what we're led to believe.
Yeah, it's, my dad calls it device-alitis now, but right. I mean, it's just, you've got to be plugged in all the time and give yourself permission to be still.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think that some of the younger people who define themselves through some of those devices, those Facebooks of the world and things like that, who are trying to learn about themselves through what other people's perceptions are of them. The thing that really I've been dying to ask you from the moment I knew we were going to have you on was, how does a young person who isn't financially ready to give to a charity, doesn't have the monies to do that yet, isn't medically able to be in the military, how do they get involved in something like Folds of Honor? How do they support the military? How do they start to feel better about themselves by the services that they provide?
Well, I mean, from a just tactical perspective, we have 31 chapters across the country. You can volunteer. That's an easy thing to do, but I would say that's Folds of Honor. But more importantly, it is about giving of yourselves to others, and that's the highest evolution of humanity. And I always tell people, young people, I say, what should I do with my life? And I was like, hey, I got the key, man. I got the magic. It's easy. What are you passionate about? What are you good at? And does it have an impact? And if you can put the trinity of those three together, you will live a full life. And that is your path to what you were supposed to do.
So you have 5 daughters, which fantastic. I have 2 and just feel blessed beyond belief. But so how do you and your wife take that message of, you're gonna fly into the wind, but also with the mindset of CAVU, right? The ceiling visibility unlimited. How do you get them to understand that and kind of live that out? Like, what's that legacy that you're trying to pass on to them?
Yeah, so I was just with my buddy Drew Brees last weekend, and he's got 4 kids, and you're always trying to be a better parent. And I think as a parent, you need to understand one thing is they don't listen to very much of what you say, but they watch everything you do. So it is like classic, you just got to lead by example. And that's the way you treat each other as husband and wife. That is how you use your time and talents. That's how you interact with other people. That's how you're teaching your kid. And I don't care who you are. After it's 15 seconds, it's just womp, 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 womp. They don't hear a thing, but they watch everything. So in that regard, you're manifesting the life of your kids by your actions, period.
Yeah.
For those of our clients who, because one of the motivators behind having you on today was making sure that our clients know of the fantastic charities that are out there, the fantastic organizations like yours, for their own estate planning, for their own giving. What can you give our audience in terms of success stories? What are the kind of things that they know what kind of things are going to happen with the monies that they are giving to Folds of Honor? What kind of success stories can we hear from that?
Yeah, so my 30-second elevator speech is, we're about bringing people together. We are a faith-forward organization every single day. And it goes back to the Bible, 87 times on the Bible, take care of my widows and orphans. That's what we do. We are not red or blue. In a world we got to pick one of those. We're red, white, and blue. And we got a small group of people in Owasso, Oklahoma. I just got my external audit for this year. 91 cents of every dollar going directly to fund scholarship programs. So we're in the top 1% of nonprofits in this country. And I look at a way to say thank you for your freedoms. You mentioned coming on here, 0.5% of this country woke up willing to defend us today. In this country, 240 million times a year, 911 is dialed, and they come to rescue us in our darkest, most desperate moments. No organization is giving their dependents education until Folds of Honor has stepped in to rescue them the same way they're rescuing us. So they can visit foldsofhonor.org. They can get a hold of me there. The need is great. We kicked out 9,200 scholarships. We had over 13,000 qualified applications. So help us close the gap on that. And, we restrict donations all the time. So if someone wants to give us money and say, hey, we want to go to the University of Alabama, we got 105 kids this fall. Awesome. Or University of Texas or Oklahoma State. We work with people, and I think that's one of the reasons we've been very successful as an organization, that we want to make sure that your goals and intentions align with the donation that you make. I think a lot of charities lose their way in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Dan, I had the opportunity earlier on to be a part of a crew that worked on the documentary for Folds of Honor, and got the chance to get knee deep really in your story and of course the birth of Folds. And as I'm hearing the conversation here today on the podcast between flying into the wind and adversity, and then also just this idea of going from above your garage to the top 1% in all nonprofits that exist in the country, a lot happens in between that. There's a lot of wind to fly through during those times. There's a story that I think does a really nice job of illustrating your persistence to get from that garage to the 1%. And it was when you were really, giving it your all to try and get, I believe it was Anheuser-Busch at the time, on board with you guys. You were literally and figuratively kicking down doors, trying to get some important meetings. Would you mind sharing that with us? Because I think it does a great job of illustrating, that idea of flying into the wind and going and being persistent, because some great outcomes can come on the back end of it.
Yeah, so the quick version, I'm sitting there watching the Super Bowl. I see a Budweiser commercial, and I looked at my wife. I was like, man, that'd be awesome. Imagine if we could partner with Budweiser. I've drank, Bud heavy my whole life because it was the beer that was in Top Gun. So that's when I started drinking it. And I'm like, because I knew I wanted to be a Top Gun guy. And so I went up there and I cold called them. I jumped on Southwest Airlines, which is now a great supporter of Folds, and cold called Anheuser-Busch, rang the front doorbell, and the first meeting did not go well. And they were nice, but they were like, hey, dude, we get hundreds of requests a week from charities across the country that want our support. And if I remember right, there were 3 nevers. This will never, never, never happen. Here's a 6-pack of Budweiser. Keep doing what you're doing. And I mentioned earlier, number 1, go before you're ready. Just went, right? Figure it out along the way. And 2, our lives are defined by what we do, and it doesn't go our way. So I left there, tail between my legs. Nobody likes getting shot down. But I went back every 6 months for the next 3 years, and I rang that same doorbell. And I finally got a meeting with who's now one of my dearest brothers in Christ, Dave Peacock. And he was CEO at the time. And I told him my story of how Fold started. I've been coming here for 3 years. And he was like, man, stop right there. I make it a best practice in my life not to get in the way of God's will. We'll figure out what we can do with you. And we've been their charity now going into our 13th year. They've donated north of $24 million to us. So yeah, it's a great example of the DNA that is in my soul. We laugh in the military. We're like, beatings will continue until morale improves.
Yes.
So it's like, man, get over yourself. If you can take a beat down, you will be wildly successful on this walk of life.
Yeah. But we really appreciate your time. If you'll indulge, I have one final question. So you go before you're ready. Is there anything like I saw you had this past summer where you got to play? I don't think Jack played, but I know you got to play who is arguably, if not the greatest, one of the greatest golfers ever, and Annika Sorenstam, and you put on that event. So what's the go before you're ready that you're working on now?
I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you.
Okay.
It is top secret, but it is massive. And my parting shot to everybody out there listening is the places that most people aren't willing to go are the places where I think God's greatest blessings live. And put your dark visor down. I'm living proof. If you just go, you have faith, you have big dreams, and you chase them, God conspires for you. And we're chasing a massive dream right now that I think we're being conspired on behalf of many to catch. And stay tuned next spring. We might just make the announcement.
All right, fantastic. We'll be looking anxiously awaiting.
Yeah, but until then, get up early, drink your coffee, get into the Bible, get your workout, and then go get after this beautiful blessing of life. And thank you all for having me on. And I hope maybe somebody took at least one thing away that lights a fire in their heart.
Of course. And hey, look, Dan, one final time we talk about this idea of path to abundant living. I mean, that's the name of our show. It's what comes beyond success, and giving back, charitable inclination and donations is a phenomenal way to do that. We've had episodes that have covered that in the past. So, as we're wrapping up today's episode, one final time for anybody that is interested in reaching out, connecting, opening up a dialogue, donating, getting involved with Folds in any way, shape, or form, what's the best way they can do that?
Yeah, foldsofhonor.org. Hit me up. So it's a small team. I will get the email. And to your point, I've cracked the code on life. And it truly is about helping others. And when you figure that piece out, you will be so fulfilled and so congruent and live an enthusiastic life. And I love the word enthusiastic because the root is in theos, in God, and helping others. That's where God put us all here. And if we were just helping each other out a little bit more, imagine the world we live in. And lots of these families need our help. So visit us, foldsofhonor.org. Thanks again for having me on, and Godspeed on the journey.
Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Greatly appreciate it.
Alrighty, fantastic, folks. Gosh, so appreciate Lieutenant Colonel Dan Rooney and his time today. Really, really insightful words coming from him. And of course, we talked a lot about the book, Fly into the Wind. Be sure to pick up a copy of that book, learn these concepts of synchronicity and Kavu and going before you're ready. A lot of fantastic wisdom in those pages. But also, I want to, kind of recap today's discussion. Matt, why don't you tee us up first? What were your thoughts with having Lieutenant Colonel Dan Rooney on today?
Like you, very thankful, appreciative that he was able to join us today. When with the stuff that he talks about, and we talk about it as well, we none of us will get through life unscathed. We are going to face hardships. And when we look back, we find, if we allow, we will grow more. It's what have we learned through this that helps us grow to that next level, if you want to use that term. And so one of the things when you read his book, when he talks about chair flying and the visualization, yeah, the ceiling end visibility is unlimited if you allow it. But know that you're going to have those times that it's difficult and hard and really tough. And he talks about it in the book, and he talked about it like there's tough times. And so you look at the level of success where he is, which he didn't talk about. He's at the highest level and has an incident and, going through all this. And again, you think he's at the height of what you would think success is, and realizes, oh man. And then now he's, 10 steps ahead of that. And so even someone who is quote unquote has it all is going to face it. And so that chair flying of, hey, really taking time to visualize what could happen, but then also visualizing the success that you would like to have, and going before you're ready. I love that phrase.
Yeah, it's fantastic. What about you, Scott? What did you take away from the conversation with him? I'm sure, gosh, there's a million nuggets of wisdom, but what resonated with you closely?
I just think it continues to help me define the conversations I want to have with clients. All the why questions I have when I'm sitting down with a client for the first time. Why are we here? What are you, why is it you want to meet with me? Why am I in this business of financial advising? Because I think of so many times where people would probably just anticipate that we're going to talk about investments all the time, but when in actuality we end up talking about so much more, the things that are important in their lives, and often the times that we have to go through those times of uncertainty, those times of conflict, and where my relationships with my clients have become that much stronger because of it. So it's just another great way to reinforce what we're doing, why we're doing it.
Yeah.
What about you, Ryan? What'd you take away?
So, I have a very unique situation. I had an opportunity to work on the Folds of Honor documentary in a prior career path. And, so I'm very familiar with Lieutenant Colonel Rooney and his life story and the Folds of Honor, the creation and the development to becoming that 1%, in the top 1% of charities out there in the country. And, in working on that project, his idea of synchronicity, which he talked a lot about today on the podcast, really resonated with me. I was coming out of a bad job before that project hit, and was really, really resonating with this word of synchronicity, and that everything is really happening in your life at the right times for the right reasons. And sure enough, we premiered the documentary with Lieutenant Colonel Rooney and his team out in LA, and had the chance to get a watch with my brother, who I had worked on the project with at the time, and we got synchronicity engraved on the watches just as a constant reminder of not only the fun that we had in working on such a monumental project for Folds of Honor, but also just this idea of synchronicity and how important it is to remind yourself that some of those times in your life where you do have to go through the wind, you do have to go before, or fly through the wind, or go before you're ready. It's all worth it, and it's meant to happen at this moment for the right reason. So, yeah, it was just really good getting to be in the same ecosystem here on the podcast today and chat with Lieutenant Colonel Rooney again.
That's so cool. Again, how it came full circle, because we had no idea, right, that you knew him or did anything with him. When, like Scott and I were saying, it's like, so I kind of went before we were ready, and it's like, well, having gone to American Dunes, like I said a couple of times, you're like, man, it'd be cool to interview this guy. So hey, let's as Steve Sims says, go for stupid and see what happens, right?
Sure.
And sure enough, here we are today and able to do it, not knowing that you had, worked on his project from years ago.
Yeah, it was really, really special time. And also, Matt, I am a golfer myself, so we might just have to tee it up at American Dunes should I find myself up near you guys again in Michigan sometime soon.
You ever make that roughly 9-ish hour drive over here? Or fly? You can fly. I forget.
Of course,
are
that exists.
Right?
Maybe I'll get Lieutenant Col Dan Rooney to pick me up in an F-16, and I'll be there in about 20 minutes,
right,
if that.
Exactly.
Then I'll pick you guys both up in the cart.
There you go. Drive us around, Scott. We appreciate it. Fantastic. Well, guys, look, no, really a great episode. We had this one circled on the calendar for a lot of great reasons, as of course, as our audience, heard and saw today with Lieutenant Colonel Rooney. We talked about this idea of charitable giving. Obviously, Folds is doing incredible work for folks out there. Dan mentioned 91 cents of every dollar, nearly 91% of all charitable donations go directly towards the scholarships that benefit these folks. So with that being said, of course, we've also had a lot of conversations on this podcast around charitable inclination and charitable giving strategies and the best way to maximize them. So for our audience out there, if today's conversation around Folds of Honor really resonated with somebody and maybe they're interested in chatting deeper about this idea of charitable giving with you guys, Scott, what would be the best way somebody could reach out and open up that conversation with you?
Well, the most direct way is to pick up the phone, call 888-211-7307. That's the toll-free number, or through our website, morsonnordman.com.
Fantastic. Well, guys, look, you've got a lot of work ahead. You got busy clients to attend to, so we'll let you get back to doing that. But appreciate you both jumping on, and looking forward to being back with you on the next one.
Great to see you, Ryan.
Yep, you too. Till the next time. All right.
All right. Thanks, guys. We appreciate you. And hey, folks, to our audience, we're going to say one final thank you for stopping by and, of course, spending some time with us on the podcast today. If you did enjoy today's conversation with Lieutenant Colonel Dan Rooney, you benefited from any of the million nuggets of wisdom that he really dropped on today's episode, go ahead and hit that subscribe button then for us on whichever platform you did check us out on. That way you never miss out on a future conversation between Scott, Matt, and myself, maybe one of our esteemed guests, where we dive into these great topics surrounding the world of wealth management and life as a whole, so that you and yours can be put on that path to abundant living. Before Scott and Matt, I'm Ryan. We're going to go ahead and say so long today, but we appreciate you stopping by and being with us on Path to Abundant Living.